Hi everyone, today I want to talk a bit about the new book Learning to Disagree by John Inazu and published by Zondervan. Thanks to Zondervan for sending me a copy of this for review. This is my honest take on the book. I'm going to take you through my typical format of the main idea, the research behind the project, the readability of its style, and then just my reaction to it as a whole. But before we jump in, I just wanted to say that I have been a fan of John Inazu for some time. I really liked his book Confident Pluralism, which came out quite a while ago by an academic press. I can't remember off the top of my head which one it was, but I highly recommend that book still. And I just appreciated his sensitive and kind of nuanced voice in a lot of issues of kind of contentious issues in our culture. So I was intrigued by this title, but I will say I was a bit skeptical of it, and I'll say more about this as I go through the review, I think, but I was skeptical of it not because of him. I was skeptical of it because of the general topic being one that's being written about kind of to death right now, in my view. Like, just so much is coming out about polarization and disagreement and how to talk about difficult topics in the culture wars. I mean, there's just so much being written on that right now. So I went into this with a little bit of a skeptical squint, but I went into it because I like Inazu. So that's kind of how I want to set up this whole review. But with that all being said, let's just jump in. The main idea of this book is, very straightforwardly captured in the title. And it is a book about ostensibly it's a book about how do we navigate areas, and especially cultural issues that are extremely charged. How do we have better conversations about them? How do we practice empathy for other people that we're in relationship with? How do we humanize people instead of dehumanizing them into just being kind of punching bags for our arguments? How do we listen well? All of those things are wrapped up in this book. And this is a book that's putting forward a way to lean into all those topics and to have better disagreements and ultimately better relationships and better conversations about difficult topics. That's what it's about, and that's what the title captures: Learning to Disagree, the surprising path to navigating differences with empathy and respect. So nothing surprising there. There are a few surprises in this book, which I'll get to in a minute. The research behind it, so John Inazu is a law scholar. He's a professor of law in St. Louis. And so the primary area of his research expertise is that of law. And so this is a very popular level, accessible level book. And so it's not littered with footnotes or citations. In fact, there aren't really in-text citations, and there's no footnotes. It's one of those books that it is noted and cited, but it's all at the end. And it's one of those books where nothing is... I have a love-hate relationship with this way of putting books together, but I get why people do it. But it's one of those books where, like, if he quotes something in the text, there's no obvious citation to it, but if you look in the back of the book, you can see the quote that's referred to and then where it comes from. So that's how the book is structured. But the better point I'm trying to make here is that there actually are a lot of citations that are just not obvious, and a lot of them have to do with legal cases, court opinions, his area of expertise. He does also reference books and monographs, but it's a lot related to law and legal precedents, and it's a lot of law related to contentious topics like something like critical race theory, for example. So that's all. It's all in there, but it's a little bit not obvious at first because this is presented as a very popular level book, and that's what I want to get into next, which is the readability of it. And I want to say that the readability of this book is where this book utterly shines. And this is where the book really pleasantly surprised me, and it really unwound my kind of skeptical squint, to mix my metaphors a little bit. I really let go of my skepticism as I got into the book, particularly because of its readability and its structure and its style. And this is what really surprised me, and in my opinion, what sets this book apart from the kind of piles of other books that are being written about this general topic right now about disagreement and polarization. And let me say a little bit more about what this book is then in its readability. It is almost like it reads a bit like a diary or a memoir of an academic year from Inazu's perspective as an instructor in an academic setting. And so each chapter is a month in the academic year, and it's very narrative driven over the course of this year. And so there's a narrative arc to the whole thing. There are characters that show up in the form of his colleagues and his students, repeated characters that show up over the course of the year. And there's a lot of reflections threaded through each chapter on here's what's happening in the kind of, the year starts off, everybody's nervous to meet each other. They start to edge into some potentially thorny conversations in the classroom, and here's how they go. And then he threads these reflections on just the general way of approaching difficult conversations in that setting. And then over the course of the year, you see as he pushes into more contentious areas and how he handles working through that in with his colleagues and with his students. And the colleagues element is part of it too, in that he's meeting with other colleagues, and they have committee meetings, and they have administrative decisions they have to make, and sometimes those touch on difficult topics that really affect the campus. And so he walks you through how those play out. And I gotta say, this is such a refreshing way to handle this kind of book. This is not what I was worried about. In a way, was I thought this was going to be a dry, abstract, theory-laden book about here are some theoretical ideas about how to disagree better, and how to empathize better in kind of an abstract reasoning kind of way. And it is the exact opposite of that. It's grounded in narrative and relationships and real life situations. And so it's just a delight to read. And as you're delighting in the reading of it, you are gaining these really wonderful insights into areas like how to have nuance, how to humanize someone who disagrees with you. You're actually, it's really kind of brilliant. I imagine he did this on purpose, but it's really kind of brilliant because by using real names and people, you start to empathize with the people in the stories, and therefore you are starting to gain the experience of empathizing with someone you may or may not actually agree with, whatever their politics are, for example, because you're empathizing with the character in the book. And then you're experiencing the very thing that he's kind of been walking you through trying to experience with someone in your real life, quote unquote. So, okay, I'm starting to gush a little bit in this readability section because this is just, for me, again, what sets this book apart from other books about the same topic. And it also is genuinely a delight to read. It's funny. It's heartwarming at points. It's emotionally touching at points. And that this all kind of sets me. So the readability is just off the charts, wonderful, amazing. It's so readable. You sink into this book, you read through it. I read through it in a day or two, just because it's so accessibly written and so winsomely written, and very thoughtful. And that all tees up my last kind of couple comments on this book. I really liked it, which is quite obvious by now. And I liked it because it was so surprising, and because it does set itself apart from other books that are kind of trying to do similar things. So my reaction overall to this was positive. I repented of my skepticism as I put it down, or actually probably about, less than halfway through the book. I thought, okay, this has won me over. And I just want to offer a few more comments about why I did like it, in addition to the readability of it. There is something that is so refreshing about his tone throughout this whole thing. He does, I think, a remarkable job at humanizing people he disagrees with, while also being honest about his disagreements with them. He's also very humble, and that's another thing that sets this book apart, is that it feels weird to say I'm spoiling things. I'm not going to spoil any elements of it, but the fact that I'm using the term spoil points back to the narrative kind of structure of this book. But there's one kind of plot arc within the book with a particular individual that really surprised me, because it actually John Inazu, in the telling of the story, models his own ability to be humble and actually acknowledge that he was wrong about some ways that he made assumptions about this particular person. And that is such a brilliant and impactful inclusion, because he is also modeling the very humility and humanizing empathy that he is encouraging people to adopt in their own life. And he tells I would say, a somewhat vulnerable story that, reflects on his own ability to do that in his own life. And so touches like that in the package of such a readable book on such a timely kind of topic, it just really comes together in a wonderful package, so to speak, a wonderful presentation. And then the last thing I want to say about it is he does include a lot of nuance, and he does touch on dicey topics that especially relate to law, but you don't have to get too far, talk about court cases right now in our culture. And you don't have to work too hard to get into some dicey, difficult areas of conversation. And he's not afraid to go in there, and he's also not afraid to confidently model nuance in those debates in this book. And again, because it's all framed up within a narrative with people and characters and real life kind of situations and dialogue, it just takes on a light that is very different from a purely abstract and theoretical approach towards trying to teach people how to be better listeners. So, yeah, those are my thoughts. A really wonderful, refreshing, winsome, thoughtful, humorous, emotionally impactful little book. It really surprised me. It really, really surprised me. And I hope, part of the reason I want to put this review out there is because I hope more people will give this book a chance. If you, like me, are a little bit tired and skeptical of books about this kind of topic, and a title like learning to disagree does not quite capture what the book is actually trying to do. So I think that this book deserves probably more of an audience than might be willing to even give it a look, if that makes sense. And so I really want to encourage people to check it out. And I also want to encourage people, because of the way it's written, because it is so accessible, I want to encourage you to like get this for other people in your life. Maybe read it with someone that you have a disagreement with. Maybe read it in a small group, neighborhood book study. I don't know, something like that. He is a Christian himself, but it is not a ham-fisted or like heavy-handed Christian account. It's there, but I really think that someone who's not a Christian at all could read this and really enjoy it and get a lot out of it, just like I did, even as a Christian myself. So I think this is a great book. I think that it's not gonna like rock anyone's paradigm who's deeply immersed in literature on disagreement and empathy. It's not that kind of a book. It's something else, but I think for what it is, it's really refreshing, and it stands apart from a lot of other writing and publishing that's being done right now in our cultural moment. And I really hope that it finds an audience, and I hope that it finds an audience that will be willing to use it practically with others who actually disagree with them, and model the very thing that John Inazu writes about so well in this little book. So yeah, those are my very positive responses to this book that very, very much surprised me. And I'm very, very glad I had a chance to read it and to review it here. So those are my thoughts. Thanks for taking some time to watch.